Hello, welcome to the SNR SPICE presentation on the Toolkit for Classroom Observations, presented by Shamika Powell, Nisha Prasad, and myself, Rochelle Tanis. Teachers everywhere often complain about how much of a chore it is to conduct regular classroom observations and documentation of students in the early childhood setting. It is often time-consuming with complicated forms to fill that takes time for teachers to learn. You may ask yourself, what is a toolkit? A toolkit is a hands-on guide for teachers to enable them to promote positive development of children in the educational setting. Likewise, classroom observation focuses on the investigation of the teaching and learning process through an organized method of data collection. In this toolkit, you will learn about the various tools that even the novice practitioner can use to conduct classroom observations in the early childhood setting. Why do teachers need a toolkit for classroom observation? It helps to guide the programs offered to determine the adjustments needed to provide improvements of children's behavior and facilitate learning. It helps to identify different learning needs of young children while helping the teacher to understand the strengths and the weaknesses of each child. It builds stronger relationship with each student, connecting them in more meaningful ways and tracking and monitoring the student's progress and development in each domain over a period of time. 3 objectives for this toolkit is to provide teachers with a variety of easy-to-use, more manageable tools for frequent classroom observations, to aid in developing their observational skills while recognizing children's learning and developmental patterns and spotting possible delays. It also helps to facilitate the systematic documentation of observations, which can be used to track, assess, and provide feedback of children's growth and development to all stakeholders. Some of the items in this toolkit includes the running record, the anecdotal record, time sampling, and the checklist. And now we'll take the time to look at the first item, the time sampling record sheet. The time sampling record is a systematic observation method used to record what occurs during a specific time period, usually observing and recording the occurrence or the absence of a specific behavior. Now, if you look at the form here on the left, it has the aim and objective area where you would record the aim or the purpose of these observations. You would also record your date, the observer's name, and the school where the child is being observed. Under the observation method, you would record the background of the study, and this would include information about the child. This form can be used to record one child, or you can use it to observe more than one children, a group of children that you are concerned about. You would state the child's name, their age, and the place or the setting where the child is participating in the activity. So for instance, if we're observing Sally, a 4-year-old child, and she's playing in the doll area, then the place would be in the doll area or dramatic play. This record uses intervals of 5-minute time slots in a 30-minute duration period. So we're starting from 9 o'clock to 9:30, and each interval is 5 minutes. Now up above, you would circle if it's whole interval. That means if you observe the continuous behavior during the entire interval, then you would be using the whole interval method. If you're using partial interval, then you're only recording if there is a single instance observed during the interval. And momentary interval, you would use this if you're recording the behavior that is observed only at the end of the interval. So you're not going to record it if you've seen it during the interval and it does not occur at the end when you look up. So for instance, if it's 9 o'clock, at 9 o'clock, if you look up, you would observe what occurs during that time that you looked up to observe the child. Using Sally as our little child. If Sally is observed in unoccupied play, using the codes below, type of play from Mildred Patton's Stages of Play, U represents unoccupied play. So at 9 o'clock, if you look up and you see Sally is not playing with anybody, she's all by herself, she's not playing, she's not doing anything, that would be unoccupied play, and you would write U on the 9 o'clock interval. At 9:04, if you look up and you see that she is still unoccupied, then you would write U again. If at 9:09 you look up and she is playing all by herself, that is solitary play, you would write S for solitary. And at the end of the 30-minute duration, you would total up all of the different codes. So under U, if you have observed her 3 times in unoccupied play, you would write the number 3 under U. If you have observed her 3 times in solitary play, then you would write 3. If she engaged in parallel play, then you would write 2 if you observed it 2 times. And there is an area for you to write your observational notes, as well as the evaluation and the recommendations. Why include time sampling in this toolkit? This method provides many benefits to the teachers in the classroom environment, as it can be used to record data on more than one groups of children or just one child. It also enables them to record specifically defined behaviors such as the play patterns, nervous habits, or antisocial behavior. And you can record using categories or codes, which makes it easier to use. I now turn you over to my colleague, Nisha Prasad, who would be sharing with you toolkit item number 2, the running record.
Thank you, Rochelle. And I would move on to explain toolkit number 2, which is the running record, and I would explain in detail how this form is to be filled out. The child's name is to be indicated on the form, as well as the child's date of birth, the child's age, gender, the date, the observer name, the school name. This form is made up with approximately 5 columns, which entails the time of the incident that is to be recorded, and the time is sequential and it's on intervals of every 5 minutes. So not only one time you can record on the sheet, it's provided that you can record at how many times you observe this child during the day. The activity code, you would circle one of the following, and it's individual, I for individual, whether you see the child or observe the child while this is taking place, or either if the incident happened in a small group, or S or L for a large group. The setting detail is the content of the activity and resources provided while the incident occurred, what you observe, whether they were fighting for a particular toy or a particular item. The others involved and the observer behavior, the behavior that the child portrayed while the incident was taking place. Interpretation, there's a line that is provided where you can write down what you interpret while this behavior or while the child is portraying this type of behavior. Recommendations, as you as a teacher or as the experienced individual, what you recommend. Of course, the observer signature, the school stamp, and the date. A running record must include everything that happens during the time it is observed. This is an excellent tool, however, to discover causes and consequences and challenging behaviors in a child at a holistic approach. It's quite integrated. It's not used for one behavior. It's very detailed. It's very short. It's easy to write, and it also takes place within 10 minutes or less. It's to be observed one child at a time on this particular sheet. Another sheet is needed for a different child. Takes note of what you see. Do not write what you didn't see or do, and do not perceive or misinterpret. State the behavior in the order it is happening. As you see, there are a 5 minutes interval after each other. The running record in terms of justification for inclusion is that this tool is very detailed, as I mentioned, and it's written in the event that it is happening at the same time. Its assessment, however, of the child behavior, it helps you as a teacher to see the interests of the child, activities that you can develop and able to help the child if the child have any weakness or any strengths in any area that you would need to work on. It helps the teacher measure students' progress while you plan for the future, and useful for planning activities. So other upcoming activities you can plan and able to assist the child in this type of behavior. It reflects and understands the child progress in all domains. As teachers as well, you need to know your child because each child is unique, and you need to know the different areas of the child development. I move on to toolkit number 3, which is the adiotal record, and I would share with you as well the information that is needed and able to conduct this report. The school's name is important, the child name, the age, the date of birth, the gender, whether it's a boy or a girl, the teacher or the observer name, the observation date, the observation time, the subject area, so whether it's in the during math or during language arts that you see this, you'll be able to write down during what subject area this occurred in. Place or the center, learning center. This is whether it's in a small corner or whether it took place in an aisle. And there are also lines provided for description of the incident. So you describe exactly what you see, what was there, what taken place. A description of the location of the incident or the setting, and notes and recommendation and action to be taken. The observer's signature, the school stamp, and date for verification as well. As I move along, the use of this tool serves as a short story for the incident as it takes place, and teachers record the incident that they are observing. It's very concise with short, it's objective narrative. It's about incidents or things that happen within a child behavior. The teacher can write and compile and use this adiotal notes for future referencing by making a documentation system. However, this adiotal note must contain factual, real, correct information, and it must be left confidential. You can also do pre-observational plan in terms of doing this adiotal record. Justification for inclusion in using adiotal records is that this record can identify as one of the most useful tool to track children development for over a period of time, and it also serves an effective way in children performance or knowing their performance and identifying developmental delays. Just to go over, it's quick and easy to write. It's also written in the past tense, something to always take note of. It records specific behavior, and you can also plan lessons to suit the child need, and it also provides families with information and update, because not only at school learning takes place at home, and you being an educator, a practitioner, the person with the knowledge and experience, you can share it with parents so they can also help their child at home. This is a descriptive one. It's one that is like a short story. As I say, and as I would mention before I leave, it must contain the date and include the name of the child being observed, and it should specify student strengths and positive traits that you see in a child. I now pass you on to Miss Shamika Powell, who will move on our 4th toolkit. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Nisha. The 4th and final classroom observational tool in SNR SPICE toolkit is a checklist. As educators, one assesses students to plan appropriate interventions to document students' growth, development and learning at a given time? Are you struggling to find time to observe your students' behavior and skills within daily routines and activities? Well, here's a tool just for you. A checklist is a classroom observational tool used for ongoing assessment and focus on specific objectives. A checklist simply indicates the presence or absence of the areas listed to be observed. This tool provides an efficient, easy, and quick way to observe and assess students within the early childhood settings. Many early childhood educators utilize this tool to explicitly observe key developmental areas such as physical, social, play, and language development. But how can one exploit this tool to use for classroom observation? Here is a sample of a speech and language skills observation checklist. When using this checklist, one must pay keen attention to important information that must be recorded. Firstly, select the developmental domain one will observe. Domains such as physical, social, and emotional, language, and intellectual development can be observed using a checklist. Secondly, state the main objectives clearly. Thirdly, one will record one's name, the student's name, grade, age, school, and date of the time when the observation was conducted. Fourthly, organize and list specific behavior and skills relating to the developmental domain selected. This checklist was designed to evaluate an individual student's speech and language development. The behavior and skill listed are categorized as receptive language or expressive language. While using this checklist, the observer must evaluate the student's behavior as they respond to given instructions and summarize the outcome of the behavior exhibited by the students. The observer will record the behavior exhibited by placing a check mark under the area that matches what was summarized. The areas listed are not observed. This means the child did not exhibit the behavior or the observer did not observe the behavior listed. Emerging. This means the behavior occurred but not consistent. The child exhibits the behavior but was not consistent in following through to completely exhibit the behavior that matches this area. Developing. This means the student is progressing in this area at an average range but still need to improve. Consistently. This means the student master the concept, master the skill, and exhibit competent behavior in this area. The information recorded should be used to develop recommendations. The observer will decide which area of recommendation is needed to cater to the child or to further help the child to develop the skill if needed. One area that the observer might recommend is to conduct additional observation or to refer the child for evaluation, implement classroom strategies, or the observer might decide based on what was observed, the child need no further action at this time. So, why does an educator need a checklist as a tool to observe students? A checklist is easy to use and less time consuming. A checklist observes students' performance to specific criteria. It provides insight into students' learning and growth. It includes spaces for brief comments that provide additional information, and it determines what condition is needed for success to occur. This concludes the SNR SPICE Classroom Observational Toolkit. Here are some brief insights to remember. Classroom observation play a central role in the teaching and learning experience. This toolkit entails essential recording tools such as time sampling, anecdotal, running and record, and checklist. These tools provide early childhood educators with efficient and manageable resources for conducting effective classroom observations. With these tools, there is no need for long training time, as these tools are quick and easy and readily available to be utilized. With this tool, as an educator, one is free to engage in more meaningful observation of the ones in our care. Thank you for watching. We hope that these tools are efficient and convenient for you to document students' progress in the different developmental domains.